What's your name now?
Paul Broomhall.
Is Paul your first name?
Paul, my first name. Mm-hmm.
What's your middle name?
F.
Franklin or?
Well, yes. Franklin was
Your middle name?
I think that's on the birth certificate. Yeah, I just always went right here.
Okay.
But you're okay.
How do you spell your last name?
Broomhall.
And when were you born?
February 5, 1917.
Were you in World War II?
World War II.
Let's see. What is the day?
May 30th.
Is this the 30th?
I'm enlisted in May the 20th in 42 and was discharged November the 5th in 45.
Okay.
There was an error on my discharge. It showed February 42 and discharged November 5 and 45. It was incorrect, and I told them about it.
They never corrected it? Keep this with your stuff, this little thing I'm going to give you here. Just keep it with your papers. And this tells you were videotaped on this date, but this tells them that you're on tape number 14. And this tape is going to be at the Portsmouth Public Library, Portsmouth, Ohio. It'll be on the shelf there. Okay, so that's for you. All right. Let me ask you a few questions, Paul. I try to also get what I call a genealogical line. People are interested in genealogy and that sort of stuff. So what are your parents' names? What was your father's name?
My father's name was Frank F. Broomhall.
Frank F. Broomhall.
Okay. I think as I go back, the F stood for fee, F-E-E.
Oh, I see.
And he was called by both family and friends. Some would call him Frank, some would call him Fee, but generally the family was always Fee. They never did use the name Frank.
Okay. He knew when to come running, though.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And now, where was he from?
He was from Brown County.
Brown County,
Ohio.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this question. What were his parents' names? Didn't know there was going to be a test, did you?
Gee, I should know that.
Well, if you think about it sometime during our session, just pop right out.
Okay.
Now, what was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Teresa July, J-U-L-Y.
Was that her maiden name?
That was her maiden name.
Okay.
Teresa May.
Okay. And what were her parents' names?
Her mother was Jane and August July.
Jane and August July. Now, where was she from? Brown County?
She was from Sauter County. She lived on Concrete.
Okay. Now, do you recall your great-grandparents' names on your mother's side? That would be Jane's parents.
I don't know. I'm sorry, but I don't know.
Well, that's all right. There's only so far we can go back. Now, let me ask you this. What was your mother's name again?
Teresa.
Teresa. Now, how many children did they have?
Let me think. My mother had, I've got to count. She had two sisters. And then she had two sisters that were dead at birth. Then she had three brothers.
Okay. So, now let me ask you this. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
None.
Okay, you were the only child?
I'm the only child to this point. When my mother's sister gave birth to her daughter in 25, she passed away right at the birth time, and she handed the baby to Mom and says, take care of her. And Mom took her and brought her home, and the father never interfered at all. He's a matter of fact, I'll say this, and this is not nice to say, but he never came around to see her or anything. So we raised her. I consider her my sister.
Okay.
Legally,
she's actually your cousin.
She was my cousin legally, but as far as our lifestyle concerned, we was raised together, and she came from day one up until she married and left.
How old were you when she came into your family?
Let's see, 25. I was 17.
Yeah.
So I was 6 years old.
6 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
7. And what happened to her? What did she go on?
She married and lived in Columbus. Her husband was discharged from the Navy with a medical discharge. Came back here, went to school, went to Athens to college, and was given a job. He got his master's in Columbus with the Armstrong Furnace Company. They moved to Columbus, and they had 4 children, and she died with cancer of the brain.
Oh, my goodness. When did she pass away?
She passed away. It's been about 1980.
Now, what was her name?
Her name was Loretta Margaret.
Loretta what?
Margaret Drennan. Her last name was Drennan.
Drennan.
Yeah.
Did she adopt the last name of Broomhall?
No, she just went by that, but legally there was never any transaction.
Drennan was her last name?
Yes.
Now, what was her mother's name?
Loretta.
So she was named after her mother.
Yes.
Well, now, did you marry?
Yes, I married.
What was your wife's name?
My wife's name is Bessie K. Yeaner.
How do you spell the last name?
Y-I-N-G-E-R.
Y-I-N-G-E-R. When did you marry?
We married in April 18, 1941.
Is that your only marriage?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And where is your wife?
She's here at Hill.
Okay, she's here at this facility.
Same facility.
Okay. Now, did she have children?
No.
Okay. Where did you live?
We went to housekeeping in Sodaville, and when I came back from the service, I wanted out of town, and we bought a place on Lucasville Menford Road, and moved there and built a house, and we left there last October and came here.
Here you go. Do you like it here?
It's very nice.
Well, I just might say for the people watching this, we are at, I don't even know this address. What's this?
1610 28th Street.
1610 28th Street. And the name of the facility is Hillview Retirement Center. Okay. Now, you told me your name and some other things, like your date of birth and where you were born. What was your occupation after you got out of the service?
I was employed at Wheating Steel. I was employed at Wheating Steel when I went in the service. I returned to Wheating Steel when I came back to service.
What was your job there?
I was working in the mechanical department as a maintenance man.
Did you know my uncle, Marvin McHenry, or maybe my grandfather, Ed McHenry?
Yeah, I knew Ed.
Did you? That was my grandfather.
Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, he worked in the mechanical department.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Let's see, I
think he was a machine shop, I believe.
I'm not sure about that. But I had another uncle named Richard. He was an electrician. I don't know if he was there for a long time. But, okay, well then you worked there, and did you retire from there?
I retired from there. Let's rephrase that.
They moved you out, didn't they?
Back when they closed the strip mill down and shut down in 1974, they shut it down.
Yeah.
I got a telephone call on a Sunday night and says, "Guess what?" I said, "What is it, Bill?" And he said, "We no longer have a job." He said, we was dismissed, he said, Friday afternoon. And I said, "Is that right?" He said, "Yeah." So when I went in Monday, they told us that they shut down and we were terminated.
Where did you go then?
Okay, I left there, and about 45 days I was working for Goodyear plant up there at Piping.
Good. No grief then.
No. I was only off just about 6 weeks, and I wouldn't have needed to been off that long had I not chose. I wanted to paint the barn. I bought a farm. I wanted to get the barn painted. As a matter of fact, that's where I was when they come down after me.
You didn't put a big mail pouch sign on there.
No, I didn't.
Painted red.
No, I didn't.
Well, let's talk about this. When did you enlist? Were you
enlisted.
Okay, and what was the date of your enlistment?
The date of my enlistment was May the 20th, 1942.
Did you enlist in the Army, Navy?
I enlisted in the Army.
Army?
And I asked to go to the Corps of Engineers.
All right. Where did you do your basic training?
Camp Edwards, Massachusetts.
All right.
Was moved from there in, I've written some dates down here. That's what I was doing. I reported for duty at Camp Edwards, Massachusetts in June the 20th, and on October the 15th, they moved us to Caravelle, Florida.
I see.
In 42.
Okay.
And we were only
this is after your basic training?
Yes.
Okay. Did you end up in the engineers like that?
Yeah, I stayed there, but we got stirred around a bit. I'll tell you, I can explain that too. And so then in October the 15th, they moved us to Florida. We were only there 5 weeks, and the weather was such that we couldn't follow our work assignments, and they took us out of there and took us to Fort Worth, California.
Oh, I see.
That's where we finished up our training program.
I see. When were you discharged?
I was discharged on November the 5th, 1945.
What was your rank when you were discharged? Sergeant. Okay. Now, what was your, what did you do? What was your job?
Okay. I need to tell you this, I think, in order to fulfill that. Back when we went in, and I chose to go to the Corps of Engineers because that was had a mechanical background, and I felt that I could do better, and I'd had some CMTC training, and I just didn't want the infantry.
CMTC?
Yeah, civilian military training.
Okay.
Okay. I mean,
was that when you were a civilian? Or
yes, no, I was in school then, and I went there for that. I was in high school.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, I mean, that used to be an average summer program.
Really?
So I didn't want the infantry, so that was why I chose to go to the engineers, and in order to get that assignment, I was told I had to enlist, which I did. Well, then at Camp Edwards, they decided things had happened over in the islands, and they was observing them, that is, the War Department was observing them, and they began to have a problem. How are we going to get our troops to these island areas in the islands where Japan is carrying this program around? We can't get them in there. We don't have no way of getting them in there because all we had was a Navy. So they came up with a plan that they had to do something. So they thought about, and this is real cute, they thought about how Washington got over here and into the United States and his method of moving and so forth, and landing and all this, that, and the other. So they come up with the idea of making us some small watercraft that would go in and dock right on the beach.
Right.
And they couldn't take the Navy, didn't have anything small enough that could be done. So they set this up, and they decided to form a program which they got underway, and they called it the Amphibious Engineers.
I see.
And they was going to use the engineering department to carry it out.
I see.
Well, there we set up in Edwards some basic training, and we were assigned to that because it was brand new, day one.
Now, Edwards was in Florida.
No, it was in
Massachusetts.
Yeah, right out of Boston.
Right.
So we were there, and we took our training with these boats, which was new out and out to everybody. We took training over in Martha's Vineyard. Well, then the weather began to get bad, and along about in the early fall, and they got concerned about training with weather conditions up there, and coldness and so forth. So that's when they chose to move us to Florida. Okay, we go to Florida. We continued our training program down there on making beachheads and moving troops. Then we had to have something to get their supplies into them, so we were assigned that detail as well. So one day we made what we called D-Day, and we was on the first wave, second wave, third wave, so forth. And then we would go back and follow up with supply, ammunition, food, and just the necessities. And that was our training, and that was the unit that we were in. And I was involved. First of all, I was in the maintenance division, which they called Sure Battalion.
How do you spell that?
S-H-O-R-E, just
Sure Battalion.
That took care of maintenance, and we worked on boats, on engines, and we set up electrical concerns.
Now, by this time, are you at Fort Ord now?
Yes, we're Fort Ord now. Well, that went on, and then in January, I was at Fort Ord got into Fort Ord on about November the 7th, and then in the 28th of January, after this training plan, we was moved to Australia.
Oh, you were?
We went to
what year was that?
That was in 1942.
1943. Before you went with it?
Yeah, well, in January of 43, they moved us to Australia.
How did you get to Australia?
Okay, we rode by boat.
Okay.
And we left San Francisco. And
well, everybody went by boat, didn't they?
Yeah, over there. Yeah, at that time. And we crossed the equator. We crossed the international date line.
What was the name of your boat?
I couldn't tell you that to say.
When you crossed the equator, did you have a syrup ceremony?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. I got wet.
Did they abuse you?
Oh, my. We thought it was terrible.
You guys were in the Army, and it was the Navy guys that were doing this to you?
They did it to us, right. Yeah. And after we went through our little dig and got out of the water and got dry clothes on, I thought it was hilarious. And I sure didn't think much of it when it happened.
Did they throw you overboard? Or
no, they had a big
water
pool set up on the back on the aft deck of the boat, and we came out up on the top side, and they walked us out on a narrow plank.
We walked the plank.
Yeah, we walked out there, and then they told us that you fouled up, you didn't do this, and with that, they just went that way, and we was gone, and down we ran. But it was real nice.
Okay. Well, then, where in Australia did
Well,
you
then we went to Brisbane. We were Brisbane, landed in Brisbane, Australia.
Was there any trouble getting Australia? Did you have any?
No, we had no problem. The flight or the unit that I was with and taking us over, we didn't encounter any trouble of any kind. And but we changed course every 10 minutes.
Oh, I see.
We'd go this way for 10 minutes, and then we'd go this way for 10 minutes. And it said it could have probably a day and a half on our travel period by making those changes because we couldn't run a straight course. But we got into Brisbane, and we went to a racetrack, and we set up in a camp. And now they moved us in units. We was rather large, and
what was the name of your unit?
I was in the 2nd Engineer Special Brigade. Okay. That was the name of it.
And were they attached to another?
No, that was our unit. But we were then, when we would go into combat, we were be attached to an infantry division for that operation. And we served, to name a few, 1st Marine Division, we was with the 37th, we was with the 28th, we was with the 29th, or the 9th Division, Australian 9th Division. We was assigned to those people for that particular landing.
What would you do? Prepare the beachhead? What would you do?
We would win first wave. We would
first wave
under fire.
And then you would, instead of tanks, you'd have bulldozers. Is that right?
No, we had what we called, at that time, we only had boats, and they was on the ground. It was all infantry progress. Then the tanks would come in later.
But you didn't want the infantry, and there you are landing.
Yeah, that's the odd part about it. I wound up right in the middle of it.
Did you have a weapon?
Yes, we did. Okay. And
I can't understand why engineer is.
After we was into this for a period of time, not too long, we made 1 or 2 beachheads. They decided that they needed a special unit, an extra special unit, because we drew so much fire and we didn't have no protection of being up front that way. So they came up with what they called a support battery. And they gave us a couple of LCM boats. They gave us 2 buffaloes. Instead of being called a tank, they called them a buffalo. And on those buffaloes, we had a 75 millimeter mounted on the back. We had 4 50 caliber machine guns on the side. And then we had 2 rocket launchers that fired rockets.
Is all of this on the same vehicle?
It's all on the same vehicle, right. And, of course, we had, I think, 3. Initially, they gave us 3. We started with 3 of them. And we would win 1-1. When we went on that beachhead, we was right there, but we had something to back us up and protect those that was gotten in there until our backup could get in. And then we became known as a support battery unit. And we continued that and was still with that when the war ended. And I got a note here that was published by MacArthur, who he states there he wants to make that permanent army a permanent army organization. Okay. That was back in 45.
Yes. So he felt that your type of unit was so important.
Very important. Right. So, but I just wanted.
Okay. Let's see what this says.
That's the history of the whole unit, and that was issued there, and I highlighted that.
Oh, okay. Now this says this is the history of the unit. Now what are one of these units your unit?
Yeah, I'm right down here. The reason I'm down
for
here.
battery.
Yeah. When I started and first went out, I was with the 592nd.
Engineer boat, shore,
that's it. And I was in the boat unit with the 592nd. Then they made these paper units, and I wound up down here.
It says here that your unit, this type of special engineer brigade, saw more combat operations than any other.
That's right. In the Pacific. That's right, because we was assisting all of the ground forces that was brought in there.
Okay, that's something. Yes.
You know, so.
Well, now let me just go back to Brisbane here.
Okay.
And how long were you at Brisbane at the racetrack?
We were there from January 1942. We was there until May in 1943. And that's when they moved us to New Guinea.
You went to New Guinea. Is this your first operation?
That was the first operation.
What is this? Where's Bougainville? Were you there?
Bougainville? No, I didn't go to Bougainville.
Okay.
But one of our units did go.
Okay. What was the name of your first operation?
Here's the area.
There's a map.
Let's see. We went up to New Guinea, and I went into.
This is a map of New Guinea.
Yeah, right. This is the whole area, and all these spots I've got highlighted, I was at.
Okay. Oh wow, you were all over the place.
Oh yeah. Well, the biggest place, I think, about the number one area that we hit, best that I can remember was I want to think it was Finchhaven, but.
Hollandia was.
Well, I was at Hollandia, but that wasn't the first one. No, I don't know. Nassau Bay.
Ward Bay.
Ward, yeah.
Revolve?
Revolve, yeah, I was over there. I'm wanting to think. We was up here. This area out here. But anyway, we come into Moresby. I remember going to Moresby.
Fort Moresby.
Yeah, down here. We went into Fort Moresby, and then we went overland and got over on this other side, and we crossed the ground to the other side.
You had to trek over the mountain range there, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And but they was most all of the troops was located in this particular area.
The Japanese?
No, I'm talking about the American troops.
And the Australians too?
And the Australians as well, yeah.
All right. So when was your first action? Do you recall?
Yeah, I can look this up. I got the whole history of all the operations
of your unit. Quite lengthy. You were in a lot of operations. Well, when you in your first operation, you hit the beach first.
Yes. First, we went up front. What we did, we was put on these LCIs, and they had water in them. They would submerge those, and the boats, they'd drop open the front gates, and the boats would go right on out, and we'd go right on onto the beach, and the troops was on us, and we had a ramp that we dropped, and you can see the concept of that.
Sure.
Yeah, this is.
That's MacArthur, isn't it?
That was MacArthur.
Okay.
And this, I don't know if you can see that, but I can.
There's a ramp.
I've seen
them in newsreels.
I got some better ones here.
Did you ever meet MacArthur? Did you ever see him?
Only I was standing on the beach when he came ashore.
Where, Lady?
The Lady, yes. I was in that detachment that went in and made that landing on Lady. And
are you in that picture, that newsreel?
No, I'm not in that picture.
You saw him coming on the shore.
That picture's in here, and I took that out of here.
Okay. All right. Is a picture of you in this book?
No.
Do you have a picture of yourself as a soldier?
No, I don't think so. But here's what that looks like. Now that's a ramp that's laid down. See, they're walking out of it.
They have a tarpaulin over there or something like that.
Yeah.
They're called a Higgins boat?
Now here was where I made those pictures. And that shows that that's a better picture.
Oh, yeah, there he is.
Coming in.
And you're standing on the
Yeah,
beach.
we're up there on this beach. It was security.
That would be October the 20th, 1944, when he lands, he wades ashore with his army in the Philippines.
Right.
They have a famous newsreel of him coming over.
Yeah.
Now, tell me the truth. I think maybe they had him, he decided to go back to get the right picture. He staged it, didn't he? Or do you know?
I don't remember. All I can remember is he was coming in. He was on a cruiser out in the bay, and that Higgins boat must have made a dozen trips, and we wondered when he was coming in.
Yeah.
Other than that, that's as much as I ever did know. He might have been dry running it. I couldn't.
That's what I think. Maybe it's rehearsing it just to get the right dramatic moment. All right.
But this is the history of our organization, complete history of it.
Let me see the front of this. Okay, let's see what it says here. Here we get a little shot of this figure here. History of the 2nd Engineers Special Brigade. Okay, that's an interesting. Is your name in this book?
Oh, yeah, a couple times. Never seen it.
Where are they? Okay, let me get a little shot of that later on, and I'll like to. All right, now let me ask you this: how many battles were you in?
That's hard to decide, but I know in the New Guinea area, our organization had 31 landings.
Oh, is that right?
We made 31 initial landings, but I was on all 31 now.
Okay.
That was several.
Okay. What was the most intense battle that you were in? Anything?
I felt Corregidor was.
Did you go aboard Corregidor?
Yeah. That was
Sure. That would be, of course, when we retook Corregidor.
Took it back. See, we came out of Lady. We had Lady and harbor all secured, and we crossed over into Corregidor.
What did you find on Corregidor? Did you find the tunnels?
Oh, yes, and I can give you a little history of the tunnels. Of course, as I say this, I speak of it as second line because it all happened, but at the time we didn't know what was happening. But when we went into Corregidor, all we saw was just a tremendous rock beachhead. We saw no activity to speak of, but a lot of shells was coming down to us. So then they pulled us out, and we went back across the bay, and they put a couple LCMs in there and put tanks on. And we knew the paratroopers was jumping, and what was happening to them. I mean, we couldn't figure that out.
Paratroopers were jumping on Corregidor?
Yeah, they were jumping. And so they got us out, pulled us back, and we went over, and they put 2 large tanks on the boat, and they filled them full of fuel oil and gasoline, and told us to get back. So we went back with them. And when we got over there, one of the Sure battalions came with a load of pipe, flexible. We call it plastic now, but then I never saw anything like it. It was flexible. You could bend it or do anything with it.
It was a new thing then, wasn't it?
Yeah. And we laid that pipe from those where the gardens had those 2 tanks on it, from there right up the side of the hill. And they stuck it down in one of those trenches, in one of those tunnels, mouth of one of those tunnels. Back down we come. And they had a pump in there, and they pumped this liquid out of these tanks into them tunnels. And the Air Force come along and dropped an egg down in there. And it went boom, and I'm telling you, fire, smoke came out of that, not one, but several of those openings. And they went back, and we made 3 trips with that liquid and pumped into there. And that's how they secured that.
That must have been a terrific sight.
Oh. But another thing that is outstanding, and it's in the book, it talks about it, we had several Japanese that jumped from there into the ocean, trying to get away. And there was a reunion. They call it now a reunion, and it actually was a reunion. One of the men that we picked up out of the water,
one of the Japanese
graduated from college over in the States here. And one of our officers had graduated from the same school a year behind him. But they knew one another. And they had a reunion
Back on Corregidor?
No. Yeah, Corregidor. They're coming out of Corregidor. They come over to Lady, and they chatted and talked all the way from the time we picked him up till they got over to shore, and then they visited one another.
Oh, I hear
They
you.
put him in a PW camp.
This graduation you're talking about occurred
Before the war.
Before the war.
Right.
And these two guys knew each other, the
Right.
Japanese and the Americans.
Right.
And it just happened to be that one that was grabbed out was this Japanese.
Right. That's one of them.
And they
There was three of them that picked up three of them out of the water, and one of them was this Japanese officer that graduated from this school here in the States.
He was supposed to commit suicide,
Yes,
wasn't
he
he?
was.
But he didn't quite do it.
You know, and it's also they remarked, you know, that this officer asked him, he said, "What do you think of the situation?" And he said, "We're fighting a losing battle." He said, "But should have never happened." And that was his opinion. He was a Japanese officer.
Well, were you wounded any?
In Corregidor, I got my hands shrapnel. Loused up my finger.
Did that get you the Purple Heart? Or
Yeah, I received the Purple Heart.
What other decorations have you received?
Well, I got presidential citation with a couple clusters. I got a Bronze Star, got the Asiatic Pacific Award, and that's about it.
Okay. Would you want to tell us how you got your Bronze Star?
Well, I suppose I could. We were on. We was in Hollandia. It was in Hollandia. And the Army Regiment was trying to take one of these areas, and they got pinned down. And there was a cave in that area at that point, and there was men down in the cave that was doing the firing and had them pinned down. And they fall back for help. And another fellow and I took a bazooka and went to answer the call. And we crawled up in there and fired the bazooka on them and quieted them down and got our people out and so forth. And we both received a Bronze Star for that effort.
What's the worst thing that ever happened to you?
Gee. In one single issue. I suppose the roughest part was, for me, maybe was when we went into Corregidor and were straight and a couple of fragments and so forth was flying all around, and there wasn't no place to go. I mean, the closer you got to the ground, the more of it was down there, and when you stood up, it was a direct target, and it was sort of a hassle where to go and what to do.
Were you in Japan after?
No, I never went to Japan.
What's the best thing that ever happened to you?
I would say that probably one of the best things happened that I can really relax, that I enjoyed mostly, was when we was, and that was before I went overseas. We was in California at Fort Ord, and this was January, and Christmas was coming up. And I had, of course, I had just left in June, and I left home in June. I hadn't saw nobody here. I had a delay in and out of 4 days on my way to Florida that I had a district. And my wife said that she'd like to come over and visit. So I went down and I asked what would be the possibilities, and they said if she would come for the Christmas week, she could make a reservation for her, and she could stay, and she'd have to leave shortly after that. And I said, why? I said, because we're going in training. Okay, now I know why she had to leave the following week. We was getting ready to leave for Australia. They wouldn't tell us.
It was training.
Yeah, training. So I went to Salinas, Fort Ord, and they gave me a pass, and I got a taxi and went to Salinas and picked her up. She came out. She got all she was working. She's an RN and worked at the mill. And she came over by train, and I picked her up in Salinas, and we were together about 9 days, right through Christmas of '42.
That was a good time.
Yeah, and all we talk about is so much.
You still talk about it?
Reminisce about the program they had there at the center for Christmas Eve, and they had a tremendous program, big dinner, and we were all invited there, and we ate, and we had a Christmas program, and they had singing, had a quartet sang, and they had a choir that sang, and some fella was Kermit Cadry there, had a German Shepherd dog. Oh, he'd sing about that high. He played the piano, and that dog was said to him every moment that he was on that piano.
Do you ever keep in touch with anybody that you knew in the service?
I did over a period of time, but they have both passed on, and it's been probably 10, 12 years since I've last heard of anybody that was in my unit.
Did you ever have any reunions of your unit?
I don't know, the second engineer unit has a reunion. I attended one.
You did? When was that?
Over in Indianapolis, and that was in, I think, along about 61 or 62.
1961, you went to see those guys.
Yeah. It was in Indianapolis. But they do, I occasionally see in the magazine, like the Legion magazine or the DAV magazine, where it's got reunions listed, and there'll be all the organizations going to have reunion in the dates, and I keep looking, and I'm ready to go to one if
all right, okay,
to see if anybody's still around, you know.
Yes. Did you like the Army?
I had no qualms with it. I thought
something we had to do.
Something I had to do, and it was an obligation, and I'm glad I went.
What were you doing when Pearl Harbor was attacked? How did you learn?
How did I learn? I was working, and we was changing an acid tub in the pickle line of the Rod and Wire Division, and our superintendent came down to tell us that we was going to have to work overtime to get it done, and to stay and not leave quit time. And by the way, he said, the Japanese had just bombed Pearl Harbor. That I was right there in the middle when it happened.
Did anybody know where Pearl Harbor was?
No, I didn't. Then when I went home, of course we was living in Southerville, and when I went home and I got off the bus at about 10 o'clock there on Gallia and Hardy, and I walked out home, I met a fellow selling papers. And he was talking about...
Did you buy one of the papers?
Right there, yeah.
Do you have it today?
I think Bessie said she still had that paper.
Your wife, Bessie?
Yeah.
She still has that paper?
I think she still had that paper.
Did you hear Franklin Roosevelt's radio speech about it the next day?
No, I didn't hear that.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to say, Paul? While you're talking, I'll tell you what. Let me come in. I'll get a picture of that. Your unit history. Let me see. Maybe I should just. I'll do that. I've learned a lot about how to operate these things.
One does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Turn the page. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Wait a minute. Find your name in there.
Oh, my goodness.
It is in there, isn't it?
But I don't know where, right?
You can't?
Pick it out. It seems to be sure. I remember reading it.
You put the page number down or anything?
No, I didn't. I got, would you believe it? I just turned to that.
What page number?
Page number is 169.
Okay, 169. And that's, I'm getting kind of mixed up here. Okay, what's it say about you?
It says here, compared to what I've been through before, Sergeant Paul F. Broomhall of Portsmouth, Ohio, said the Hollandia operation was a breeze. The support battery was assigned to the 532nd for an operation, and the 532nd landed the 41st Infantry Division. Jap found out on us, both when we hit the beach of Hollandia and later when we took a regiment from the 41st across Lake Centania.
Okay, there you are. You turned right to it, didn't you?
I don't know how that happened, but I guess I was supposed to.
I think you were.
Yeah.
Let me see here. I'm getting all mixed up here. Keeping this running at the same time.
I might add that now over at Lady, they have built a permanent memorial for General MacArthur's landing there on Lady.
Have they?
Pictures that I showed you.
Uh-huh.
There's a postcard out at a friend of mine that visited over there on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
I had that postcard here.
Okay. Hold that postcard up. And you got it upside... No, you don't.
No,
Got something underneath it there that's upside down.
I can do it this way.
What is that?
This way.
Okay. Hold it straight up. There you go. Now, that's where you were.
Yes.
Okay, and that's in the Philippines, isn't
That's
it?
in the Philippines. This is the
Okay.
current monument there now.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to say?
I can't think of anything further that I need to elaborate on other than I've got that.
Well, this is the surrender of the Japanese. You made a copy of their...
signed USS Missouri.
Yeah. Were you there?
No. No, I was in the 29th replacement depot waiting from home.
When did you get back to... Did you land in California?
Yes, I landed at San Francisco, and we left, got in there, and we went to, and I can't think of the name of the post that was in San Francisco at that time, but anyway, they took us down there, and we got in about noon or so, and they took us by truck, and then that evening, 7 o'clock, they took us into dinner. I had my first cup of coffee with cream.
Really?
Really. What coffee we had was all what we call now, I forgot, instant over there, and then, of course, cream and sugar was gone. There wasn't such a thing.
When did you first see your wife and after you got back?
I got back in the States, came to Indiana for a discharge on the 5th. Got the train out of there, came to Cincinnati, and she was standing over here in South Shore, Kentucky when I got off the train.
Waiting for her.
Waiting for her.
Your dad was there?
My dad and my mother and her was there. And my sister.
Okay.
Yeah, they was all there.
Did you have your uniform on there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I just gave that. When I came here, I didn't have a place for it. I came here, I gave it to Mr. Russell that's got this.
Oh, Mike Russell.
Mike's got that.
That's his flag there.
He's got his flag.
Yeah.
Well, he's got the uniform, the whole uniform, coat, everything.
So you got a bronze star?
No, I got the medal itself, but I don't know whether the bar was on the coat.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
but
on
you had the medal yourself.
Oh,
Okay.
emblem was on the coat that she has.
Well, thank you very much.